Located on anything.
Okay, good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from Garage Art today. Picking up on this painting, Rupture of Plane, pretty close to where I left it off yesterday. I've gone ahead and drawn in the first two figures with some white lines here and here. And now I'm going to drop in some shadows there and here, using this pretty much for the light source in that. And then perhaps render them into place just to make their presence a little more solid before continuing with the rest of the composition. So here we go.
Or an ecstatic visionary goes into the wilderness and through ordeal or yogic practice or breath control or the taking of a psychoactive substance perturbs the mind, then we see what the mind is out naked, undressed from the clothing of language and convention. That's why I've made this point over and over again. There will not be a serious discussion of the origin of UFOs, or for that matter, of the nature of consciousness itself, until we leave the utterly culture-bound, provincial, and hick-like attitude that science has foisted on us about perturbing the mind. Without the use of psychedelic substances, I think solving the UFO dilemma is going to be as thankless a task as attempting to understand the nature of the universe without availing yourself of the use of a telescope. It is simply tying our hands behind our back. Now there is a third possibility, which is the one that is the more commonly entertained notion, which is simply that we are being observed by intelligent life forms that evolved somewhere else in the galaxy. They have quarantined our planet to keep us from being agitated by their presence, and they will eventually reveal themselves. I find this an extremely odious notion, especially the part about how much chaos there will be if the truth is ever revealed. This is nothing more than the reassertion of masculine paternalism, its right to keep secrets from the rest of us, its belief that there is a privileged all-male class of people who can be let in on what's really going on, and the rest of us, poor dears, have to be shielded from these tremendously shocking facts. I discussed this once with an entity, and it said to me, well, you know, we've disguised ourselves as an extraterrestrial invasion so as to not alarm people with what's really going on. We're getting close to the end, so there is a fourth possibility, which I mention only in the interest of thoroughness, which is that these entities and their vehicles are not spacecraft at all, but are in some sense time craft, and that we may be the tremendous sense of empathy with these quite physically unusual beings may arise out of the fact that we're looking into the faces of our great-great-great-grandchildren, who may be emanating back through time, carrying the message, a message, about some sort of future event or situation that lies many centuries downstream from us, but that is of such import that from that point, agents are moving backward and possibly forward through time, spreading the news of some kind of mode shift. This doesn't seem to me to be impossible. However, based on my own experience, which is what I think this thing really comes down to, because what we have in the UFO issue is an official position supported by scientists, whether they be Neanderthal right-wingers or doctrinaire Marxists or whatever, a conspiracy of consensus against the personal experiences of individual human beings, who are told, well, what you're saying happened to you can't have happened. You are insane, you are mentally ill, you are mistaken. So what we really have here is a political issue. Which do you believe? Your perceptions, memories, and expectations aided by your intellect, or some kind of utterly abstract, official, doctrinaire, sexist philosophy laid on from above? So I think really what the saucers do, if you accept their presence, is they empower us. They empower us to see science for the shell game that it is, to see the past 400 years of Western culture for the pathetic narrowing of the spectrum of allowable phenomena that it is, to the point where people think that if you can't bang on something with a hammer, it isn't real, which to me is just wild talk. I can't even imagine where that kind of this thing is coming from. So I think, and I'll just leave you with this final thought, that in lieu of the repression, and it is a repression throughout this century of legitimately available ways of exploring the modalities of consciousness, and by that I mean psychoactive compounds, the repression of those compounds and their use by science has created a neurotic energy dynamic in the mass psyche, and the mass psyche has begun to hallucinate because the destiny of human beings is to live in the imagination in the hands of the goddess. And wherever that thrust is impeded, psychopathy will result. There will be neurosis, there will be psychic epidemics, there will be confusion. So I believe that until we form a resolution to conduct an unfettered and mature exploration of the human psychology using all the tools available to us, that the skies of Earth will continue to be haunted by flying saucers. They will continue to be haunted by flying saucers and their denizens because they are symbols of our infantilism, of our sense of loss, of our incompleteness. And we can heal that breach by simply recognizing that the true mystery lies within us. The true mystery is in the mind, and its historical promise is the transformation of our society through the abandonment of reason as it has been narrowly defined by this extremely solar, masculine, paternalistic, materialistic legacy that we are the victims of. Well, I could talk for a long time, but I think that's it in a nutshell. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a hard act to follow. I won't even try.
That was very pretty. Thank you so much. I asked a number of people how they would describe Terence. Do you have a sense of deja vu about this? And they said that he was an expert in Amazonian shamanism, expert in alternative states, and a philosopher. And you heard him this afternoon completely knocked the bejesus out of time. So what he's going to do this evening, I really don't know, but please welcome once again, Terence McKenna.
Well, it is late, and my voice is fading, but my talk this afternoon was fairly brief, and there were a couple of points I didn't cover. Before I get into that, though, I would like to thank and call attention to the magnificent accomplishments of Elise Agar and the Omega Foundation. I think Elise and her people have done a tremendous job, and this is definitely the most glittering New Age event that I have ever had the privilege of attending. I said to someone, does the fact that the backdrops are beginning to look like the Russian Revolution mean we're making progress? I don't know. Can you all hear me? How's that? Ah, yes. Okay. The area that I wanted to spend a few minutes on tonight that I didn't touch on this afternoon is what then is to be done? Tolstoy's question. Once we reach this level of admitting the phenomenon, experiencing the phenomenon, trying to talk with each other about it, what is to be done? How are we to translate the message coming from the other side into a concrete reality that works for all of us, or is that a good thing? And my take on this, which is nothing more than my take on it, is that what we are involved in and with in the UFO phenomenon is an extremely poignant and intense effort to end our alienation from the unconscious, that we can no longer have the luxury of an unconscious portion of the human psyche, that is an artifact of the childhood of our species, and that in fact the ending of childhood, anticipated brilliantly in Arthur C. Clarke's novel Childhood Then, the ending of childhood is what we are experiencing in relationship to the alien archetype. As a species, we are coming into a kind of pubescent awareness of the presence of the other. Our childish historical concerns that were self-directed and self-indulgent no longer satisfy, and a deep kind of yearning has come upon the species, a yearning for the confirmation of the presence of an other, in the same way that an adolescent child that becomes aware of and develops an extremely intense, highly charged, and ambivalent attitude toward the opposite sex. I think we are discovering in our own psychic structure the potential, the possibility of a relationship with an intelligent species outside ourselves, and this raises for us all the tensions, all the issues that accompany an adolescent love affair. How are we to eliminate the human unconscious and come into our birthright as fully conscious, enlightened beings? What is to be done? Again, my opinion is that what we need to do is to concentrate on the phenomenon of communication and the evolution of language. We have been far too naive about the role that language has played in the construction of reality at its center, let alone off on the fringes with the elves and the fairies and the UFOs. We need to test the envelope of language. We need to perfect the fine idea of being able to communicate with each other. At the moment, and I think we proved it at this conference, it's nothing more than a fine idea. I felt before I came to this meeting that we would all sit down in a room and make great progress in about an hour toward understanding the phenomenon. And then I discovered that we were all, including myself, heavily freighted with linguistic momentum, the power of our own metaphors to carry us past the opportunity to listen to what other people were saying. And so I think that what we are dreaming of is a common language. And what the saucers are attempting to teach is the modality of a linguistic transformation in the direction of a kind of communication that is not dependent on culturally sanctioned dictionary, but that is in the bones, in the neurons, in the synapses, so that the ambiguity which attends all our discussions about reality will be purged from our worldview. This is the essence of falling in love. One definition of falling in love is nothing more than lifting the veils of misconceptions between two entities and still being able to go forward towards some kind of union. So I really believe that we have moved so far from an awareness of the feminine portion of our psyche that now the thing dearest to us and closest to us must present itself in consciousness under the guise of an extraterrestrial or interdimensional invader. It's a comment on the alienation of our era, and the way this schism can be breached, the way this psychic wound can be healed, and a kind of species-wide individuality emerge is through taking control, conscious control of the evolution of language. This means paying a great deal more attention to what we say to each other, to linguistic intent. I think that the main legacy of the 1960s into the 80s was a legacy of language transformed in the direction of feeling. To me, the most shocking part of the male dominance of our worldview is the paucity in our language of terms that convey emotion. We have 500 words for the components of a steering mechanism. We have 5 words for emotion. Each one of us is a swim in a concatenation of emotionally subtle wave phenomena that come and go just below the surface of our awareness. But if any one of us turns to another and says, "How are you doing?" the answer is, "Fine, fine, yourself." This is presenting a tremendous barrier to us to the expression of our wholeness. And I'm completely willing to line up behind Carl Jung on the notion that the UFO is an expression of our longing for wholeness. In principio et verbo caro factum est. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. In other words, if you were an actual extraterrestrial standing off in a spaceship looking down on this planet, you would not see the strivings of individual species. You would not even see the great classes of organized organic life. What you would see instead is a gene swarm, a language frenzy, the coding of meaning in genes, in words, in architectonic production, in poetry. What is happening on this planet is the self-reflecting genesis of communication for itself. It is language somehow that is loose in our species, on our planet, within and without the flying saucer. So communication, which we take astonishingly for granted, considering the very basic kinds of needs that we communicate to each other, is actually the great frontier of our spiritual becoming. It seems to have passed right by us that we already possess a form of telepathy, that the miracle of communication involves the fact that I make small mouth noises and you instantaneously consult the culturally sanctioned dictionary, and out of your dictionary you construct a map of my linguistic intent, and then through a series of grunts and nods we assure each other that we know what we mean. So in a sense, I said this afternoon that the UFO was here to confound us, to confound science. On another level, like the psychedelics, it is here to catalyze a finer evolution of communication, to boost us toward a little tighter epistemic and ontological definition of the business of communicating with each other. If we could refine our channels of communication, we would coalesce.
Gets them in place a little bit.
Kind of omnipotent,
First two figures. I'm not sure if there's going to be more. I kind of like the dualism that sets up.
So I think
but anyway,
the flying saucer has become the guiding image of our own cultural
get some roughed in
evolution.
place.
We are going to live in the imagination. This planet is involved
and some
in a
shadows
birth
dancing
process. There is nothing unnatural about what is going on this planet, and there is nothing unnatural or inappropriate about us. It's simply that the planet has carried us to term. We are now ready to leave the womb, and the womb is in danger of toxemia if we in fact do not leave it. We have passed into a new kind of time.
Okay, but that's it for the moment. I'll probably do some more sessions and tack them onto this later. But that's what I was trying to accomplish for this first step. So.
Like a transfer television on the cinema.
Okay, take two. I'm going to deepen the shadow color with madder carmine and a alizarin crimson opaque mixture.
These seem to be related kinds of phenomena. So, if we see this as almost some kind of reawakening of the visual imagination, the representation of the unconscious phenomena, the prototype for all of which is, of course, the world of dreams, which occur in darkness, in sleep, indoors usually, and in flickering and incomprehensible way. The real roots is the world of dreams and its actualization or externalization through cave art and then through these variety of other transform, fairy tales told around campfires, again the flickering light associated with the play of the imagination, the imagery conjured up in that case by words. But then the visual representation shows indeed some kind of connection. So I think you're right that we can see this as part of a larger process of reawakening the collective imagination.
It's part of an archaic revival. The print thing is very artificial, and we live completely within it.
The thing is very artificial.
Well, I don't see that so clearly. I mean, the print thing is a technological artifact less than 500 years old, and yet dominating the sensory ratios and psychologies of virtually every person on Earth.
We have 1 million years of consciousness, and we have only 50 or 100,000 years of speech. Speech is a newcomer on the scene. Our morphic field barely recognizes words.
But words are still an incredibly deeply established creed compared with written words or print.
Yes.
And if you look at non-literate cultures, then of course the oral tradition is very important, but I suppose also there's a much higher developed visual imagination. When you go to a Hindu temple or a Gothic cathedral, primarily designed to be appreciated by non-literate people, then you see a riot of psychedelic type imagery. Demons and snakes wriggling everywhere in Hindu temples, psychedelic stained glass windows in Gothic cathedrals, amazing vegetational forms and structures and shapes.
But it isn't a smooth, unbroken development. It's that even between manuscript culture and print, there is an enormous leap that takes place, because the psychology of manuscript culture is that you must look in order to understand. That's the essence of manuscript, because no font is ever repeated. No E looks like every other E, so you must look at manuscript. Reading of print is a very different psychological function, because in the first few minutes of reading any text, you assimilate the font. From then on, you don't look at E's and F's and L's. You automatically assimilate them. It's always the same. There's no decipherment of the visual surface in the act of reading print in the way that there is reading manuscript. This is what McLuhan is talking about, of this linear, uniform, high-speed thing which sets up democracy and modern science and reproducible data and all these things that we take for granted or that we fail to examine deeply are an aspect not only of the linearity of print, that's been pretty well talked to death, but the uniformity of print, and the curious way in which you don't have to actually look at it, sets us up for psychological blind spots that have closed us off to the reality of the visual world.
Compression,
narrowing,
informational content of medium, but then since cinema, video, computers and computer graphics, there's now going, and expansion is in progress, which may expand well beyond any richness of media that history has seen before.
Generally speaking, yes. The only caveat is that for the people who give their lives to this stuff, cinema is in no way seen as a precursor of television. Cinema is related to photography and related to the reconstruction of ordinary visual space. Television is a pixelated medium, very much like manuscript, and not at all like photography, because with photography, the eye is not asked to work. The eye beholds a photograph. The eye decodes the television screen. The fragmentation of the image makes it into an entirely different medium.
Well, it's a matter of degree, as with high-definition television, the resolution of video is increasing due to the overusage of silver and the organic pigment and so on. The resolution of film is decreasing. Sometimes they'll meet. Computer graphics has the potential of resolution on the level of cinema. So let's think of a sequence then of manuscript, printed book, cinema. Okay, we'll skip television. Then think of computer graphics.
Well, television is related to the psychedelics.
As interactive cinema, not as interactive video. I think that's appropriate.
See, if these people are actually right in their analysis of the effects of these media, then high-definition television is not television at all, and will not have the same effect that television has been having. In fact, high-definition TV may give a surprising shot in the arm to the, at this point, on-the-ropes, linear uniformitarians, because it's going to be much more like cinema and photography, and it's not going to have to be deciphered. It can be looked at, and this will have unexpected consequences on the sense ratios and assumptions operating within a society.
Video is doomed not because of a resolution limitation, but because it's not interactive. An interactive computer graphic game where you can watch the soap opera, but also play with it, change the script, and so on, is bound to be much more interesting just because of interaction than video or cinema.
More like a dream, in fact.
More like a dream, in fact.
Well, one of the things they've discovered that's very frustrating to the engineers of virtual reality is they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting fast enough computers so that when you turn your head, the scene is reconstructed in the way that normal space is. But what's fascinating is they discover in virtual reality, people rarely turn their head. People know that they are in a television-created space, and they immediately lock into their long ingrained habits of watching television, and people sit with the iPhones on like this.
It's temporary.
Because they don't understand that if they're not watching TV, and you have to tell them, turn your head, keep turning your head, stop sitting still. You do not have to stare at this. You say, oh, that's right, I don't have to stare at it.
That's temporary, because video and cinema are on the way out. I think the future of cinema is that all the films ever made will be digitized and stored in a gigantic library, where in the context of computer graphic VR parlor game, you can call up at will, images from here's Cleopatra Salome or something, and put them on the walls around you. So, well, interactivity is the primary. I mean, this is the area where the computer revolution and psychedelics are in convergent evolution. They're coming together in the interactivity, but the extent to which the computer medium could be shared by a large number of people gives an idea of a further advance in ultimate evolution beyond what was accomplished by hippies in the 1960s with psychedelics. Larger groups spread over space and time can come into morphic resonance with the same image.
But this takes us to another key point in the whole thing, which is that if, in relation to mathematics, since mathematics represents a particular realm of imagination, for many mathematicians a particular realm of visual imagination, this is Ralph's chosen field, of course, that the normal way of communicating mathematical ideas is through a kind of symbolic structure, as unrelated to the visuals, as musical notations to the sounds we hear in a symphony. And the secret which good mathematicians seem to have inherited or picked up almost by accident is that these symbols relate to what Francis Galton called mathematical landscapes, an inner imaginary space which creating mathematicians have. They see forms. He described how great mathematicians of his acquaintance reluctantly admitted, when they questioned them closely, to seeing landscapes with little balls and running down and shapes changing before their very eye. This was how they did their mathematics. They then later translated and expressed it through symbols. Other mathematicians with this gift could somehow pick it up by a kind of resonance, the symbols acting as some medium or attunement to it. And this is actually how at least many branches of mathematics have been carried out. It's still true today that good mathematicians have mathematical landscapes and mathematical imaginations. But this is a secret kept from most of us while studying mathematics in school or in university, where these symbols seem quite impenetrable. The manipulations you do with them seem quite arbitrary. And it seems to me that one of Ralph's points is that the computer graphics revolution now makes these rather abstract mathematical systems, previously only visualizable by mathematics, and even then to a limited extent by mathematicians, like fractals and so on, immediately accessible to everybody. So suddenly these abstract mathematical concepts and mathematical spaces now become common cultural artifacts. Now have fractal sweatshirts and fractal imagery on printed fabrics and so on. So through computer graphics there's this opening up or democratizing of the mathematical imagination. And I imagine that when mathematicians take psychedelics, that their already developed mathematical landscape undergoes an expansion, intensification, or some other interesting development. Since mathematicians have this peculiar and unusual kind of visual imagination to start with. Is that the case?
Yes, I think that we could put this in the category of outing the unconscious, that for peculiar reasons, evolutionary mistakes, mathematics had actually gotten relegated to the unconscious, you see. And it does have to do with printed books, I'm sure. When mathematicians speak to each other, they wave their hands, they draw pictures one at a time on the board or with their hands in space, and they speak simultaneously and in coordinated like dance is to music. The picture in words, so it requires the cooperation and coordination of multiple modes of representation in order to communicate a mathematical idea from one trained mathematician to another. So see colloquium talks, which are public performances of mathematical creativity in the act, performed live to lots of people trying to understand. And you always see these visual didactics, I call them, moving pictures with lyrics that are coordinated, done in a very artful way, using the room as like the memory palace of Giordano Bruno. So here's a space, this corner, and this is where this goes, and this, and everything is coordinated with space. The dance of the performer, the waving of the hands, the drawing on the blackboard, and singing of the words succeeds by telepathic miracle in communicating the idea. Then you have books, textbooks for teachers to use in schools who aren't trained on this level or something. So you send the book to the publisher with the drawings in the margin. The publisher writes back, we can only have 100 line drawings in this book. That's the limit for financial reasons. So then you get a book which fails in the communication of the idea, even to a trained mathematician. And out of this tradition comes this heavy reliance on symbols, which, for a person already trained in the mathematical dance hall, actually do reawake. They blow up the entire image. They recall it from practice, in the memory field, a little icon. That's fine, but for somebody to learn mathematics from scratch in this way, it's impossible. So after this limitation of books, the transition from manuscripts to printed books, it was at that time that mathematics became arcane, was relegated to the unconscious. Along comes computer graphics. Suddenly mathematics becomes visible. Suddenly we have visual mathematics, visible mathematics for the first time in a long while on a public scale in t-shirts and so on. So I think that it's true that mathematics is one key area which is saved from oblivion by the computer revolution, making visual mathematics possible and part of the daily experience of anyone with a personal computer.
Or don't you think it's just part of a larger program of language generally becoming visible through the medium of the computer? That what's happening is that language is about to conquer the visual dimension, and the mathematical shock troops have somehow gone over the top first, but ordinary language can hardly be far behind.
Yes, the current, the hot frontier of the computer revolution today is multimedia. That means you'll have a CD, and when you double-click on the icon, you get songs, dancings, moving, colored pictures, dramas, a coordinated multimedia display created by expert, best understanders of the subject, who say how to repair a car, or how this tree grew from a seed, and the morphogenetic field, the geometry of the soul. Wherever you double-click, you're going to get this multimedia show, which is actually interactive. So we see that again, back, slow down.
Well, it's the species mind, and nothing is happening except that what was previously wetware and driven by intuition is being made explicit as hardware and driven by a machine interface. We're downloading or uploading the unconscious into a cultural artifact, and it's gaining presence in the domain of culture through this process.
Children's books, since I was reading to Cosmo yesterday, and there's this book which is, it's got pictures, they're interactive. You can open the door, look inside, you see a crocodile, you close it, then you open this box, there's a snake in there, close it, you open the clock, there's a bird in there, and these children's books from which children actually gain their initiation to a certain level of initiation of awareness of the environment and so on, the language, the cognitive strategies for understanding all this. These books are much more successful, sophisticated, and rich than the books which are used to teach mathematics to advanced engineering students in universities.
They're like crude DMT hallucinations.
Yes. So the best of books, like children's books, and the computer revolution is now advancing to a point where they're sort of getting to the level of children's books as far as richness of media is concerned, but there's a long way to go before they can approach, I mean, they'll never get there, the richness of experience of a psychedelic trip, either alone in the dark room or with a group of people exploring a flower. It's a long way to go.
Well, coming back to the connection between psychedelics and the computer revolution, there are several ways one might look at it. One is, well, first the sociological fact, as revealed both on the basis of biblical stories and on the survey accounts.
Alright, that starts developing some richness and variety of color. I like the idea of the shadows, deepest part of the shadows being a deep maroon red, sort of emulating the onset of the visionary experience with mushrooms, sort of the hypnagogic breaking into the next dimension, rupture of plane. So, my aperture's a little low. Hold on.
The word processor, the commonest use of the computer in everyday life, is an updated version of the typewriter and so on. It's not something that breaks radically with this tradition. It's in fact the colonizing of the visual space.
Washed out at the top of my light is, but anyway, you can see how the shadows are starting to develop around the figures. So I'll pick this up again in a little while, and we'll have a take 3, assuming I can figure out what I'm doing next.
But when you get a group of people like
Alright,
this,
for the next segment,
there
I'm
is
going to,
fair
well, there's only a few minutes left on this memory card. That's right, it's the old memory card. Oh dear. Okay, so I'm going to have to transfer this before I do more. But in the next 15 minutes, I'm just going to take some bright yellow and reinforce the glaze glow of the bright yellow portions. So here we go.
More than half of us. Well, what did the other half of you think about that? I mean, well, something that at first, second, and third glance does not appear to be at all like Aunt Minnie. In other words, if it's smaller than a bread box or not made of matter and it's talking to you, it's a safe bet it's a non-human entity of some sort, right? So those of you who haven't had this experience, see, the thing to put across is there's so much loose-headedness in the world, and this is really a stumbling block for psychedelicos, because we have people claiming to channel 11,000-year-old Central Asian herders who have a message for mankind, and we have people who are in contact with all kinds of entities with weird names. And so then the people who don't do psychedelics say, well, this is something, it's like channeling or all this other stuff. No, it isn't, because we are not like those people. I mean, I maintain this rigorously, that our bit is intellectual rigor, not airheadedness. We're willing to put as much pressure on the ideas as you want. We just believe in fairness, so that it's not ipso facto that there's no such thing as elves. It's that if you think there are elves, prove it to me. Well, then the problem is that the skeptic, the critic, says, well, the notion that there are elves is just, you're sadly deluded. You're living in your own private Idaho. But then you said, well, the proof of the pudding is a 15-minute DMT trip. Are you willing to carry on this criticism after having made the experiment, sir? I mean, we're not like UFO enthusiasts. We're not telling you to stand in cornfields in the dead of night and pray. No, this will work. This will work on you, the reductionist, you, the doubter, you, the constipated, egomaniacal father dominator. It'll work. And then they just, and they say at that point, you are a menace. Is what you are. Because there's no place else to go with that game. You have to say, you and your ideas are illegal, or they say, well, I guess I'll have to just try it. And that's the point. That's the point where we've come to, is to slowly try and create a consensus. One of the things that Ken said, quoting the teacher, that is very profound is that words are alive and that they multiply. And at every recent workshop I've given, I've talked about the notion of means. And those of you who have heard it, it's okay to hear it again because this is the political baggage of this trip. It's that, first of all, do you all know what a meme is? A meme is to information as a gene is to genetic information. So the way to think of a meme is it's the smallest unit that an idea can be broken down into without losing its coherency. Ideas are made of memes. And memes, like genes, compete in an environment very much like the environment in which Darwinian natural selection goes on. So a new idea is a meme, and it immediately begins to compete with other memes in the ideological environment. And the psychedelic meme is such a meme. Now, one profound way in which memes are like genes is genes can be copied, they can be replicated, they can be passed around. So can memes. When I tell you something which you remember, I have taken a meme, and if 15 of you remember it, I have propagated the meme to 15
okay.
new
The glare kind of washed out that yellow
Each one
a
of
bit,
them
but
is
I'll pop
capable
the
of now passing
camera
this
over so I
meme
probably
along,
wash my
provided
hair.
they replicate it with sufficient fidelity. And this is a problem of information.
And it's pretty thoroughly
degradation.
saturated.
That if the meme
I think
is
the
not
next step
reinforced, it
will be
peters out.
blending
Someone says, well, what did so-and-so
glow
say? And then you get a
so that it
version
overlaps
that is unrecognizable.
onto
I have this experience
begins
all
to
the time.
bleed over
Because
onto
people come up to
the
me and
deep
say, you know, I thought it
plane
was
being
wonderful
ruptured
where
there.
you said
I guess would be the best way to describe
and then
that.
they break out with something not only that I've never said, but that I never
Here, hold
could
on, let me
conceive
click this
of
off,
and
that might
probably
help.
don't agree with.
There we go.
So
Now turn the aperture
keeping the
up.
memes straight is very important, and the psychedelic meme is competitive with, the just say no meme, for example. And I believe that on a level playing field, the most
so I think it's a toehold in the idea.
Prevail.
Now it's just a lot of refining and development, and toying with the idea of having a scene either emerging through the gold glow or different elements weaving their way through this dimension into that dimension, kind of stretching out the reddish blue globulous ground. But I don't know yet, so we'll see how it develops. But anyway, that's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, from Garage Art in Taos, New Mexico. Also, much art, redid the walls, reorganized my corner, and I hung a nice dream up on this wall because it fits a little better. And One Lifetime over here is a little easier to maneuver off the wall. It's a little smaller.
It interprets open-endedness as a kind of thread, a feminine upwelling or a boundary-dissolving influence. So it's very concerned to
put a lot of time into this one.
generate some kind of
and aside from my art, which you can see here, we've got all kinds of neat stuff. Desks, antiques, lamps, things like that, other artists' art, and free books, a stack of free books, if anybody needs any free books. So, thank you for watching, thanks for your support online, and I'll see where this goes tomorrow.
We are empowered.